Imagine you're in your own home, the one place you should feel safe. Now imagine that just outside your door, a group of armed men, one from every powerful tribe, has gathered with a single goal: to kill you in your sleep. This was the terrifying reality for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in his own city of Makkah. For more than 10 years, he and his followers had faced constant persecution. They were mocked, boycotted, starved, and even tortured. But with every challenge, their faith only grew stronger. Now his enemies had reached a final, desperate conclusion. They decided that the light of this new message had to be put out, once and for all. That one night set in motion a dangerous journey across the desert known as the Hijrah. It was an escape, a migration, that wouldn't just save the future of Islam, but would forever change the course of history. This isn't just a story about a journey from one city to another. It's the story of a journey from persecution to freedom, from a few scattered followers to a global community, and the birth of a new civilization. This is the story of the Hijrah, the escape that changed the world. The air in Makkah was thick with conspiracy. 13 years of the Prophet calling people to worship one God had shaken the very foundations of the Quraysh, the ruling tribe. Their power and wealth were built on the idol worship happening at the Kaaba, and they were losing their grip. They had tried everything to stop him. They offered him riches, power, and marriage to the most beautiful women, anything he wanted, if he would just give up his message. He refused. They sanctioned his followers, cutting off all trade and social ties, trying to starve them into submission. Still, the message of Islam continued to spread. They tortured the weakest among them, hoping to make an example of them. But the faith of the believers never broke. Frustrated and terrified of Islam's growing influence, the chiefs of Makkah held a council of war in their parliament, the Dar al-Nadwa. Things were coming to a head, especially after a group from the city of Yathrib pledged their loyalty to the Prophet and offered him a safe haven. The chiefs knew that if Muhammad escaped and set up a base in Yathrib, he would become a real power, a threat to their entire way of life. One by one, they offered ideas. "Imprison him," said one. But another shot back, "His followers will just break him out." "Exile him," another suggested. But a wise old man, a devil in disguise, some say, warned them. "His powerful words will win over other tribes, and he'll return with an army to crush you." Then the most ruthless of them all, Abu Jahl, laid out a terrible, final solution. "We'll choose a strong young warrior from each of our clans, give each one a sharp sword, then they'll all strike him at once as a single man. His blood will be on all of our hands, so his clan can't possibly take revenge on all of us. They'll have to accept blood money, and we'll be rid of him forever." The plan was set. They would do it that very night. As darkness fell, the assassins surrounded the Prophet's home, their swords gleaming under the moon, waiting for him to fall asleep. But inside, the Prophet wasn't unaware. Divine revelation had come, not only telling him about the plot, but also giving him the permission he had long been waiting for. It was time to migrate. The era of patience in Makkah was over. The Hijrah was about to begin. But how could one man escape a house surrounded by assassins, let alone travel hundreds of kilometers through the desert with a huge bounty on his head? The answer would come from a plan so brilliant, so divinely guided, that it would become a timeless lesson in faith, strategy, and trust in God. The night of the Hijrah wasn't just a leap of faith. It was a masterclass in strategy, proving that true faith works hand in hand with smart, careful planning. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had deep trust in God, but he was also a brilliant strategist. He didn't just walk out the door expecting a miracle. He and his closest companions put together a plan with layers of deception, logistics, and incredible courage. The first and most dangerous role fell to his young cousin, Ali ibn Abi Talib. As the killers watched the house, the Prophet turned to Ali and asked him to sleep in his bed, wrapped in his green cloak. This was more than a small favor. It was a potential death sentence. Ali would be the first person the assassins saw when they burst in. But without a second of hesitation, Ali agreed. His love for the Prophet and his faith were so strong that he was willing to be a human shield, buying the one thing they needed most: time. With Ali in his place, the Prophet Muhammad calmly walked out his front door. Tradition tells us that as he moved through the circle of assassins, he recited the opening verses of Surah Yasin, and God shielded him from their sight. He sprinkled a handful of dust over their heads, a symbol of their failure, and slipped away into the night. He didn't head north towards Yathrib. That was the obvious route and would be heavily guarded. Instead, he went straight to the house of his most trusted friend, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Abu Bakr had been ready for this moment for months. He'd bought 2 of the best camels and had them specially fed and prepared for a long, hard journey. When the Prophet arrived and told him, "Permission has been granted," Abu Bakr's eyes filled with tears of pure joy. He asked, "Will I be with you, O Messenger of God?" When the Prophet said yes, Abu Bakr's heart soared. This dangerous journey was the greatest honor of his life. The plan covered the entire journey. Instead of the main road, they would travel south, the complete opposite direction of their destination, Medina. Their first stop was a small cave on the peak of Mount Thawr. This move was designed to completely mislead their pursuers, who would be searching all the roads heading north. But how would they get news and supplies? This is where Abu Bakr's family became heroes. His son, Abdullah, a sharp young man, would spend his days in Makkah, listening in on the Quraysh's plans. Every night he'd sneak out to Mount Thawr and report everything he'd heard. His daughter, Asma, was in charge of food and water. Each night, she would prepare supplies and make the difficult journey to the cave. One time, with nothing to tie the bag, she tore her own waistband into 2 strips, using one to secure the supplies. This act of ingenuity earned her the name Dat an-Nitakain, the woman of the 2 waistbands. Finally, there was the problem of their footprints. In the desert, tracks are a dead giveaway. Abu Bakr's servant, a shepherd named Amir ibn Fuhaira, had a simple but vital job. Every morning, after Abdullah and Asma had visited the cave, Amir would guide his flock of sheep over their trail, erasing their footprints from the sand. The plan involved espionage, supply lines, and counterintelligence. It teaches us a powerful lesson. The Prophet and his companions did everything humanly possible. They planned, they prepared, and they used all their resources. Only then, after tying their camel, did they put their full trust in God. They showed that faith isn't an excuse to do nothing. It's the foundation for taking action. As they headed south towards the mountain, they had done their part. The rest was up to God. For 3 days and 3 nights, a small, dark cave on Mount Thawr became the refuge for the 2 most wanted men in Arabia. The climb up had been brutal. The Prophet had walked barefoot in parts to hide his tracks, and the sharp rocks had bloodied his feet. Seeing this, Abu Bakr, out of deep love, carried him on his shoulders the rest of the way. Before letting the Prophet enter the cave, Abu Bakr insisted on going in first. He checked every corner for snakes or scorpions, tearing pieces from his own clothes to plug any holes he found. He wanted to make this shelter as safe as he possibly could for his beloved friend. Once it was clear, he invited the Prophet inside. Exhausted, the Prophet laid his head on Abu Bakr's lap and fell asleep. As the Prophet slept, Abu Bakr stood guard. Suddenly, he felt a sharp, burning pain in his foot. A venomous creature from a hole he'd missed had stung him. The pain was immense, but Abu Bakr didn't even flinch. He refused to move a muscle, terrified that he might wake the Prophet. He endured the agony in total silence, his loyalty stronger than his own suffering. But as the venom spread, tears of pain streamed down his face and fell onto the Prophet, waking him up. Seeing his friend's swollen foot, The Prophet simply applied his own saliva to the wound, and by the grace of God, the pain vanished and the healing began. Meanwhile, back in Makkah, the Quraysh were furious. At dawn, they stormed the Prophet's house, only to find Ali in the bed. When they demanded to know where the Prophet was, Ali bravely told them he had no idea. Realizing they'd been outsmarted, they flew into a rage. They beat Ali and dragged him away, but he said nothing. They then rushed to Abu Bakr's house and were met by his daughter, Asma. The brute Abu Jahl screamed at her, demanding to know where her father was. When she refused to answer, he slapped her so hard her earring flew off. Still, she remained silent. The Quraysh announced a massive bounty, 100 camels, a king's ransom for Muhammad and Abu Bakr, dead or alive. This sent every tracker and bounty hunter in the region into a frenzy. The hunt was on. Expert trackers picked up the trail and, despite the clever route south, eventually followed the faint footprints right to the base of Mount Thawr. The search party started climbing. Inside the cave, the two friends could hear their voices getting closer, the sound of their feet on the gravel outside. The sounds got louder and louder, until the shadows of their pursuers fell across the entrance. They were just feet away. All one of them had to do was look down. This was it. The moment of total vulnerability. All their brilliant planning had led them here, but now they were trapped. There was nowhere left to go. Abu Bakr, his heart pounding, turned to the Prophet and whispered, "If they just look down at their feet, they will see us." He wasn't afraid for himself, but for the Prophet and the future of his message. In that moment of pure tension, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, turned to his friend, his face completely calm, and said the timeless words that have comforted believers for centuries, words now immortalized in the Quran. "La tahzan," he said. "Do not grieve." Then he added, "Inna Allaha ma'ana." Surely Allah is with us. What do you think, O Abu Bakr, of two people, when God is their third? It was a powerful reminder that their real protector wasn't a cave or a clever plan, but the Lord of all creation. And in that moment, as the story goes, a miracle occurred. By God's command, a spider had woven a thick web across the mouth of the cave. Nearby, a dove had built a nest and laid her eggs. When the pursuers got to the opening, they hesitated. The lead tracker was sure this was the spot, but the others laughed at him. "Look at that spider's web," one said. "It's old. It's been there long before Muhammad could have entered." Another pointed to the nest. "And look at those doves, resting so peacefully. You think they'd stick around if someone had just passed through?" Convinced the cave was empty, they argued with the tracker, turned around and headed back down the mountain empty-handed. They were so close, but they were blinded by the very signs God had placed in front of them. The most fragile things in nature, a spider's thread and a nesting bird, had become an unbreakable shield. The 3 days in the cave of Thawr became a profound lesson in tawakkul, the perfect blend of doing everything you can, then putting your complete trust in God. After 3 days, the immediate search had died down. Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr confirmed that the Quraysh were now focusing their hunt on the northern routes. It was time to move. Their guide, Abdullah ibn Uraykit, a man who wasn't a Muslim, but was known for his honesty and expert knowledge of the desert's secret paths, arrived with the camels. He would lead them on a remote coastal route far from the usual caravan trails. They traveled mostly at night, under the vast desert sky, resting during the blistering heat of the day. Abu Bakr was constantly on alert, sometimes walking ahead of the Prophet, sometimes behind, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. When the Prophet asked him why he kept moving around, he replied, "When I think of pursuers from behind, I move behind you. When I fear an ambush from the front, I move ahead of you. I just can't rest, not knowing where the danger might come from." Despite their caution, the bounty of 100 camels was too great for people to just give up. News had spread to the Bedouin tribes, and among them was a fierce warrior named Suraqa ibn Malik. He was sitting with his tribe when a man mentioned seeing a small group of travelers on the quiet coastal route. Others brushed it off, but Suraqa's instincts screamed that this was his chance. Wanting the entire reward for himself, he cleverly changed the subject, then quietly slipped away to prepare his fastest horse. Suraqa galloped across the sand, spear in hand. Before long, he spotted them in the distance. As he closed in, ready to attack, something strange happened. His prize horse, which had never stumbled before, suddenly buckled, its front legs sinking deep into the sand and throwing him to the ground. Furious, Suraqa blamed it on bad luck, got back on his horse, and charged again. This time he got close enough to hear the Prophet calmly reciting the Quran, not even bothering to look back, while Abu Bakr kept glancing over his shoulder nervously. And again, his horse's legs sank into what should have been solid ground, throwing him off even more violently. Now Suraqa knew this wasn't normal. This was supernatural. He realized he wasn't just chasing a man, he was fighting a power far beyond his own. He tried one last time, but this time his horse's legs sank and a cloud of dust erupted from the ground. His greed instantly turned into awe and fear. He understood. These travelers were protected by God. The hunter was now the one begging for mercy. "I am Suraqa ibn Malik," he shouted. "Wait for me. I mean you no harm." The Prophet stopped. Suraqa approached, all his arrogance gone, and confessed that he had come to kill them for the bounty. He then asked for a written pledge of security, sensing that this man would one day be a great leader. The Prophet, always merciful, had the pledge written on a piece of bone and given to him. Then, as Suraqa was about to leave, the Prophet looked at him and made one of the most astonishing prophecies in history. "O Suraqa," he said, "how will you feel when you are wearing the bracelets of Kisra?" Suraqa was speechless. "Kisra?" he stammered in disbelief. "The Emperor of Persia?" Kisra was, at that time, one of the most powerful men on earth. The idea that a desert bounty hunter would one day wear the crown jewels of the Persian Empire was absurd. But the Prophet, a fugitive in the middle of the desert, calmly replied, "Yes." Suraqa rode away, his mind spinning. And he kept his word. On his way back, whenever he met other search parties, he sent them in the wrong direction. The man who set out to capture the Prophet had become his protector. Years later, during the rule of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, the mighty Persian Empire was conquered by the Muslim armies. The treasures of the emperor, including his famous bracelets, were brought to Medina. Umar remembered the Prophet's words, summoned the now elderly Suraqa, and placed the jeweled bracelets of a fallen emperor on his wrists. There, in the Prophet's mosque, a Bedouin stood wearing the treasures of an empire, a living testament to a promise made in the dust and heat of the Hijrah. After about 8 days of hard travel, covering nearly 400 kilometers, they finally saw the palm groves of their destination. They stopped first at Quba, a village on the outskirts of Yathrib, to wait for Ali, who had safely returned the valuables people had entrusted to the Prophet back in Makkah. In Yathrib itself, the news of the Prophet's journey had arrived long ago. The Muslims there, known as the Ansar, or the Helpers, had been waiting with incredible excitement. Every single morning they would walk to the edge of the city and scan the southern horizon, desperate for a glimpse of the man they had promised to protect with their own lives. They would wait for hours in the hot sun until they could bear it no longer, then return to their homes praying for his safe arrival.